Hey there, Kenneth French of Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. We're very, very happy you stopped by. Either you're going to watch this or listen to this because you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably an entrepreneur who's either just starting out or you've been around for quite a while and you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably a real estate investor, maybe even a real estate agent, maybe a professional or of some sort, professional advisor of some sort. And well, you are stopping by because you need some valuable advice from one of the top industry leaders there is. Anyway, thank you very much. Once again, Kenneth French, Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. Really glad you stopped by.
Asset protection. Everyone kind of knows of the term, but they don't really know what it is. We're going to go over the specifics here in just a little bit. Basically, one of our clients, our investment client here at vastsolutionsgroup.com, asked for a little bit of an understanding as to why it's important. What is an LLC? Just the basics. I said, sure, I'll give you a few moments talking about that. So here, why don't we go ahead and go straight into the presentation that I think pretty much will outline the specifics of what she thinks as far as asset allocation, as far as asset protection, et cetera, et cetera. I think hopefully it'll also help you. So really, if you really think about it, what is asset protection? I can give an example. Let's say you've been working for 20, 30 years. You've amassed whatever, let's say pretty good portfolio, 10, $20 million. And then someone comes and does a lawsuit, takes everything away, and you have to start over. Let's say you're, I don't know, in your golden years, let's say your 60s, 70s, you don't want to start all over again. Well, one way of kind of protecting against that type of a scenario is an asset protection strategy. And I'm going to go over that. Now, it's just a kind of a lock on your assets, making sure that people can't unlock or open the door, if you will, to all of your assets. So asset protection really, in a nutshell, it's making sure your assets stay with you versus someone else in a lawsuit, typically. So what is asset protection? It's risk mitigation. As you can see, asset protection aims to reduce the risk of lawsuits, usually lawsuits. People think, oh my gosh, this person's a rich real estate person. Well, what does that mean? Well, someone thinks you're a rich real estate person, they want to come after your assets versus going after someone who's got a nominal net worth. Real estate is one of those things that people think, well, wow, there's a lot of wealth in that family, as an example. Maybe, who knows, maybe they don't have an asset protection strategy in place. Well, okay, I'm going to go after that person's assets. If you have a good kind of structure in place, which we're going to go over, it can help, make sure it stave off that risk and the legal strategy. Now, people say, well, are LLCs, and is it me acting as a company or is it me acting on my own behalf? Well, let's just remember, all you are as an individual is an entity. All an LLC is an entity. You have a social security number as an individual, and at the same time, you as a LLC, quote, you as an LLC, you have an EIN typically, or a master identification number, either one. So here we're just saying, well, put together an LLC, typically put together an LLC, making sure you don't have to worry about risk because you have your assets in that specific LLC. Now, what do I mean by that? If you put an asset, let's say in an LLC, something happens somehow, let's say someone takes you to court, wins a lawsuit, in that LLC, well, can they come after, if it's properly structured, all your other assets? The answer to that, generally speaking, meaning outside that LLC, no, not if you have a properly structured plan. Or, if you can make sure they don't what's called piercing the veil, you make sure that veil, that's a true to life LLC that's running correctly. You probably don't have to worry about your other assets getting hit with a lawsuit, et cetera, et cetera. Asset diversification. So let's just say you have 10, as an example, 10 properties, each one worth $1 million. You own free and clear. If there's a lawsuit on, let's say, LLC 1, again, now in this case, they wouldn't be able to go after LLC 2, LLC 3, all the way to LLC 10, because that one LLC, the lawsuit would be confined to that LLC. So, you have asset diversification as a result. And by the way, if you're working with a good attorney, asset protection group, they can make sure that you're protected in such a way that it makes sense in your specific circumstance. By the way, yeah, you can put together an LLC very easily, go down to Go into any computer and just play around and figure out that, you could put together an LLC, but it's overall structure that makes sense. That's what you really have to think about when it comes to asset protection. And it lowers your liability here. You see liability reduction. It lowers your overall liability because you have a structure in place as a result. Going back to LLC, I mentioned I was going to talk about LLC. An LLC, limited liability company, it started years ago in Wyoming, and now it's adopted in every single state in the United States. Basically, it's a popular entity that offers liability protection. Now, why an LLC over an S corp as an example? Usually, it's the administrative costs. Plus, the LLCs are really uniquely suited for asset protection. Now, what I would also say, depending on the taxation and your structure and your situation, sometimes an S corp may make sense for an entity, or I should say, well, for an entity, for the asset, depending on what the assets are in the in that specific entity. Sometimes, by the way, a C corp makes sense. Usually not, but sometimes a C corp makes sense, or a partnership, depending on the circumstance. But usually, a LLC is the right thing to look at when looking at protecting liability for oneself as far as an asset protection structure. Now, let's talk about the importance of proper planning, because that's what basically any attorney will help you with. It's, by the way, now if you really think about it, not all attorneys are created equal. You might have one who's doing whatever IP law, one who's doing asset protection. Usually, you should go to an asset protection attorney. We deal with Bob Bloom, who's one of the greats as far as asset protection in the United States. He took over Jay Minton's book. When I say book, his business, and it basically he really has learned all the specifics from Jay Minton. He's the father of asset protection in the United States. He basically made it so all his clients are properly structured because they're doing proper planning. I call it the moat system. Jay and Bob, by the way, also runs vastassetdefense.com, with whom we're a network company. Imagine being in one of those castles back in the old days. You have a moat around your castle, sometimes with sticks sticking up. Well, if people wanted to attack your castle, well, if you have a moat around it, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get at your assets. And if they have a huge bit of water in front of that castle, it's going to be a lot harder. That's the same thing with asset protection. If someone has planned correctly and someone sees, let's say someone who wants to, get at the castle, they see mass water in between them and the castle, they're going to be less likely to try to get to the castle. But then again, if they have a poorly structured, let's say moat, and let's say there's a bridge across the land and the water into the castle, well, wait a minute, there's higher likelihood that someone's going to go to the castle. Same thing with an asset protection structure. Let's just say you have a properly structured asset protection plan. Someone might be really afraid because they're going to say, well, it's not worth the trouble to try to do a lawsuit now. But let's say it's not properly structured. Well, there you're going to have a likelihood of potentially a lawsuit, just like I said, if you have a bridge over the water as an example. Now, it all is based on planning, proper planning. Anyone could put together an LLC, as I mentioned, but it's the overall plan that makes sense. By the way, they're not as expensive as they used to be. Asset protection plans are not nearly, costs are coming down as far as asset protection. So it's at least something to think about with respect to, especially if you can get into real estate, where most of our clients are into. At least look into an asset protection strategy. And now you could do it with trusts, depending on the circumstance. You could do it sometimes even with a little bit of insurance. And then also the entity structure, LLCs, depending on the circumstance, even, corporations, depending on the circumstances. But again, what I would say is put together a plan with proper, with a consultant who specifically goes down the path of asset protection. Planning is very important. And usually I would say talk to an asset protection specialist. That's why we've brought Bob in under our umbrella here at vastassetdefense.com. So we are working with a group that works with our clients, because our clients are, big real estate people usually, and we want to make sure they're taken care of, because I don't want to, bring a client under our world and all of a sudden them lose all their money just because of a lawsuit. That could be one of the worst things in the world, right? Hence the reason we did the strategic alliance with Bob. And here, the time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. That totally makes sense if you think about it. Everyone, talks about, needing insurance. Well, when they need it, they wish they had it, right? But when things are great, they don't think they need the insurance, right? They don't want to pay for it. Well, think about it. This is a very good quote by Kennedy. Time to repair your roof is when the sun's shining. That makes a lot of perfect sense. So let's talk about some key elements to, asset protection. As I mentioned, liability insurance is very, very important. I know, some people don't think, well, I don't want to spend the money on the asset protection strategy on liability insurance, but liability insurance in itself, meaning umbrella insurance, it's got lots of loopholes, lots of kind of things that can be pierced, but it's worth it just in case because it's so cheap, right? Separate business entities, as I mentioned, if you have LLC 1 all the way through 10, sure, it's a little bit of work, I will say that, but at the same time, you're taking care of because everything in that one LLC. If you do lose that lawsuit, if something did go wrong, as long as you properly structured it, they can only go after LLC 1 in my example. Sometimes you could use domestic, United States based, and sometimes foreign trust, depending on the circumstance. So retirement accounts. A lot of times, retirement accounts are shielded from lawsuits if they're properly structured, depending on the circumstances. That's also something to think about. 401ks, profit sharing plans, defined benefit plans, indirectly IRAs, but not quite as much, but sometimes. Now, overall, we've talked about the benefits of the LLCs. By the way, I should note, if you do have, let's say, nominal questions as far as asset protection goes, email us at info@vastsolutionsgroup.com, info@vastsolutionsgroup.com. We'll answer some kind of nominal questions. Or, by the way, you could also come into our community. We have a community. Go to vastsolutionsgroup.com, vastsolutionsgroup.com. Look for the Vast Vault. Get in there. There's a free community that we have a lot of information as it relates to the benefits of LLCs, asset protection, et cetera, et cetera. We also have a paid Vast Vault where members get a huge amount of content. Bob and I know the number of attorneys are in there talking, helping, tax providers, insurance providers, risk providers who are in there helping add value to the members of the Vast Vault. Those who have gotten into the vault are very happy. It's a relatively new thing for us. We didn't realize it was going to grow to the extent that it has. And again, go to vastsolutionsgroup.com. So again, if someone has some nominal questions about the benefits of LLCs, tax advantages, et cetera, please go ahead and email us at info@vastsolutionsgroup.com. Garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good information going into the process and the planning process, you're going to get bad information coming out. But what I would say is it's very important that you spend time in the planning process on the big kind of putting together the formulating of the plan when you meet with the attorney, when you meet with, the asset protection advisor, because it will help you, because it will make sure that you have a moat around your business. Here you say, you have to look at all your risks. What risks do you have? Do you have a likelihood of whatever getting audited, as an example? Do you have a likelihood of would a warranty help you? Warranty insurance, even, by the way. Whatever your risks are, look at all your risks. Have outlined all your risks. Take that afternoon, take that evening to figure out what all your risks are. Do you need life insurance, as an example? Do you want to make sure your heirs are taken care of? Do you need an LLC? Do you have real estate? Usually the people watching and listening to this would have real estate. And so hopefully they do have their real estate in an LLC. If it's properly structured, they probably do. Develop a comprehensive strategy. After you've figured out your risks, look at the strategy that you need to deploy. Implement the plan. Put the plan in action. Have a good documentation outlining your LLCs, your strategies, et cetera, et cetera. Then going forward, make sure that you're monitoring and you're adjusting things. And an annual basis, in our opinion, in December, usually you should look at your asset protection, if you will, strategy. Make sure that, see what has changed over the year. As an example, do you have an LLC that now has nothing in it, and do you have a property over here that should be in the LLC, as an example? Or do you have a piece of real estate that now all of a sudden has jumped up hugely in value? It used to be worth $1 million, now it's worth $2 million. Well, you're exposed. That $1 million, that's provided exposure, risk exposure. Well, should that be in another LLC? Meaning, if it was combined with another piece of property in an LLC, should that be moved into an LLC, depending on the circumstances? Well, again, every December, in our opinion, you should be looking at your asset protection structure and also what needs to be changed within the structure. I'm going to give a case study as an example. John and Jane, they had their assets all, properly structured. A lawyer tried to go after them. He at that time didn't know that the assets were perfectly structured. I mean, perfectly structured. So he took the time doing the research. What he found was they did have a properly structured LLC, and they had properly structured overall holding LLC, et cetera, et cetera. He ended up not going through with the lawsuit because, well, he didn't state this, but really it was going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort. He knew that he wasn't going to get whatever the lawsuit was, his 30 or whatever, 40% of it just wasn't worth his time. So we moved on to another potential litigant, right? So if you really think about it, that's where I was talking about. If you have a moat around your business, properly structured, well, it's going to be harder. It's going to be, well, not only harder, but potential litigants won't want to do a lawsuit because they know it'll take time. They know they won't be able to get their whatever. As an attorney, won't be able to get their 30%. Let's just say that, there's $1 million lawsuit and they want their, $300,000. But if it costs them $500,000 in effort, probably it doesn't make sense. Same thing with the litigant. There are habitual litigants out there, by the way. So what I would say is, in this example, John and Jane Thompson, they were completely taken care of because, well, there's no reason, luckily, for the lawsuit because they knew it's going to be not in their best interest, meaning the potential people who wanted to enter into litigation. Now, at the same time, what I would say is, people say, oh, I'm going to put it off. I put mine off forever. My asset protection strategy took forever to put in, to actually put into place. Yes, you could put it off till tomorrow, but then again, do you want to lose all your assets before tomorrow? That's what I would say. But what I would also say is, why not take the time, talk to an attorney, talk to a good asset protection attorney, especially if you have a good net worth, then make the determination if you want to, take that next step. It's probably free to at least take that, have that conversation. Now, again, what I'm going to do is in closing, once again, the Entrepreneur's Manifesto, a collection of smart financial advice, free email book to info@vastsolutionsgroup.com. Again, vastsolutionsgroup.com, info@vastsolutionsgroup.com. Number one. Number two, when I'm also going to offer up Bob Bloom again from vastassetdefense.com, he's nice enough to offer 30 minutes of his time to at least have a communication, have a sit down with someone to review a structure. If you bring in your structure, he'll at least spend half an hour of his time going over over your structure. He's even go a little bit further because he's going to actually review the structure. He won't even say just in general by talking over the phone. He'll review your structure if it's all laid out for him and makes it a lot better for him. Remember what I said: garbage in, garbage out, same thing. So once again, this is Kenneth French. I'm with vastsolutionsgroup.com. A little bit about us. We've been around since 1969. We're an investment company started by the lovely and talented Gary Kuhn. Sadly, he's passed on. In 2006, I took over the company. And again, by the way, once again, my name is Kenneth French. Took over the company in 2006, and now we've grown it to having an office in every single state. We do tax, finance, and AI. We've been doing AI for years. We're not new on the block. Been doing it really since 2018. We started in 2010. We use artificial intelligence to help us as a business owner to, make for a good back office, clean back office, good customer service, while also helping our clients utilizing our artificial intelligence engine called Einstein. If you have any questions, nominal questions, info@vastsolutionsgroup.com. Once again, Kenneth French of vastsolutionsgroup.com.